Hey folks, it's Dr. Rowe. Hope you're well. Evening is beautiful, as you can see, and I just wanted to do a short video for you because today I was actually recording a live webinar with Harminder Toor. Actually, what am I talking about? A podcast, not a webinar, a podcast with Harminder. And Harminder and I were actually working quite hard on a strategy. I've got an itchy nose, actually, excuse me. We were working on a strategy which has come up a lot, and the challenge is to do with relationships, and specifically questions that have been coming in. Sorry about my itchy nose. A bit itchy head as well next. That have been coming in. Questions actually to do with the fact that we're currently in COVID, and a lot of people are finding that they're wanting to learn and study and grow. I think I talked about this last night in a video actually, but their partner's not necessarily doing so. So Harms and I had this conversation during the week, and he said, is this something you see a lot? And I said, I've seen it a lot for many, many years, obviously being out in front of different audiences. So we decided to do a podcast on it. Now, the plan was to make it like a 1 hour podcast just for speed. Needed to get a lot done today. And we thought, well, let's get this out as a really short, sharp, punchy podcast to tackle head on. I mean, literally head on the subject of, are you and your partner actually growing together or growing apart? It ended up being about an hour and a half, because the more he asked questions, the more I just revealed what I'd witnessed. And I basically walked through a 5-stage process that couples go through, of which there is a breakpoint in that process where they either evolve and grow and actually keep cyclically growing, or they go down a slippery slope and end up separating and going in 2 different directions. And it is a big subject. Have a good itch. Thank you. That's brilliant. Sanjay said, have a good itch. Our house is, as you know, being renovated, and we have all of our insulation is naturally insulated with a sheep's wool. It's called thermofleece. And I was literally just up there trying to move some stuff, and a whole bunch of it came down, and I breathed it in, which is all right because it's natural, but it got me itching. I thought I want to go out and do a quick video before I get the sun goes down. I'm off for a bike ride in a bit as well. Anyway, back to what I'm trying to say. Serious theme, genuinely serious theme. I have seen, and I mean this, countless couples over the years where one of the couple has come to a seminar, come to a workshop, is wanting to be coached around the subject of growth, personal development. And when they've come into that environment, the partner hasn't come with them. And the question Harminder said to me, which was a very powerful question, he asked the question around, is this something that just builds up over time? Does it happen quickly? How can you spot the signs for it? Is it a big challenge for a lot of couples? And I said, pretty much most couples go through a point where one is likely to want to grow more than the other one. Now, if it's a one-off and you want to go do a training or a seminar, want to learn something, read a book, try a new subject, go learn to fly, whatever it is, go climbing. We talked about that today, actually. And your partner says, I'm really not interested. I don't really want to do that. The one-off situations are fine, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a different set of values. And we talked about the difference in values. We talked about the difference in basic human needs that people have in regards to relationships. And what came out of it was, one of the questions was, is it just a one-off? Actually, the thing is, the one-off situation is not so bad. Where the issue comes up, and do take the time to watch the podcast, because we kind of delve into this. It'll be released, I think, in 2 days, which is Saturday. growthtribes.com if you haven't come across our podcast yet. The main thing here is that if it's a one-off incident, that's fine. But if one of the partners consistently doesn't want to engage with the other partner on growing experiences, on learning experience, on expanding experiences, what typically happens is one goes in this direction and keeps growing. The other one pretty much stays in the same place. Now, depending on what your expectations are, your vision is for an amazing relationship and your expectations of the future with your partner, that can be a major issue. And I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just being honest, because I've worked with so many people over the years, that the frustration I see in a lot of couples is one of them is just like, but my husband or my wife just does not want to grow. They sit at home, I come and do all these things. I'm trying to get us to, when we started, it seemed like he, or it seemed like she wanted to do these things. But for some reason now, change the light there. For some reason now it's changed, and they're not they're just not the same as when we first met. And that was a question that Harminder asked. So I actually pretty much started on the podcast explaining exactly why that happens. And there is a very specific reason it happens. And rather than me go into it here on a live, because I haven't got a lot of time, I'm going to encourage you to actually take the time to go listen to this. If you're watching this right now and your partner over these last few months has not necessarily taken a lot of interest in growing and learning and expanding, and you're feeling a sense of frustration, that may continue to grow, especially if you've now reached a point where you're actually, you feel that you've got to a point where you're kind of almost feel like you're outgrowing your partner, and that can happen. So I'm just going to turn this around. There's a bit more light on me there. Is that better? I think it is. Listen to the podcast, because I give a formula at the end. There's a 5-step process to actually getting out of that. There's 5 stages that lead people to going into it, and there's 5 steps to get out of it. And the biggest challenge is when people get into this cyclical process. Harminder talked about the fact that, what happens if somebody splits up? And the question is very important, because if you split up in a relationship where you go off and you continue to grow and your partner hasn't, and then you decide to go in separate directions, you go into another relationship, there's a very good chance that cycle might repeat itself. So somehow you've got to find out a way of getting to know somebody better, qualifying that person, and making sure if you're going to go into this relationship and have a great relationship involves you growing and expanding, then make sure that you have asked the right questions going into that relationship to start with. So look, the signs typically are you get frustrated with them, you feel like they don't show a lot of interest in what you're doing, you feel like they're not really listening to you, you've lost that sense of connection. Maybe you don't have the same desire to talk to them about the subjects that you're learning, you're growing, you're studying anymore, whereas in the past you used to, but now you just can't be bothered because they don't seem to be bothered either. And these are the things to be careful of. So if you are currently sitting in a situation right now, you've really got to take the time to sit down with your partner, because the wedge continues to grow. And when we come out of COVID, what will typically happen, and this happens for a lot of people when they go through a challenge, is you'll either stay there and you'll just click back into the old way of doing things. So in other words, one of you goes off to work, the other one goes off to work, you come back, maybe you carry on doing a few seminars and growing and studying, the other person doesn't, the TV goes on, and that's what they do, maybe. And for some reason your values feel misaligned, and you can probably carry on that for quite a while. And it's one of the things we talked about in the podcast. Or whilst you have the opportunity now during lockdown, you sit down and have the conversation. And that's what I went through at the end of the podcast. I actually went through a very specific 5-step process that I know works. I've done it with a lot of people. It was almost like a coaching session during the podcast. So I think it's worth watching if you are a coach and you are working with people. I think you'll find it very useful. If you're in a relationship and you're feeling a sense of this, without a doubt, I want you to watch it because I think, listen to it, because I think you'll hear, and it's quite good because you'll hear Harminder ask questions specifically from his generation versus my generation. And if you're in a relationship and you feel like that tug is happening, in the 5 stages that I'm talking about, in stage 3, and Harminder and I explored this a lot, stage 3 is where the breakpoint starts to happen, where a shift happens in a relationship, and it can start to go one of 2 ways. So it might be you're there right now. Some of the signs might be revealing themselves, in which case, don't panic. There are ways out, there are solutions, but you are going to need to work on it. Okay, so Hannah's asking the question, where can we find the podcast? Okay, so the podcast, and Harminder's online, hopefully he's watching right now. I can just see him, he's jumped on. The podcast is at www.growthtribes.com, and you go and click on the podcast there. So we basically have 27 podcasts that we've created now. You can either look up Growth Tribes on Spotify, go on to iTunes podcast and look us up there as well. It is number 27 and it's coming out on Saturday, and it's one of the biggies as far as I'm concerned. We both came off pumped. I mean, I unloaded, literally. I mean, it was just, no holes barred. I'm not going to bullshit. This is where it could go if you don't get this shit sorted out. And it's a big one. If you've got friends and family or people that you care about that are going through this shift, or even if you see it in them, catch it early. Growth between couples is immense. It's so important. And growth happens massively at the start of a relationship. And then for some reason, which I'll explain in the podcast, I'm not going to do it here because I go into a lot of detail there. There's a specific set of reasons why for many couples, that growth starts to disappear and they just fall into a habit. They became roommates, they just plod along, and that growth just dissipates. So if you're a coach, a mentor, somebody working with people, and you're not familiar with this template, this model, this system that happens, and it's just a process that happens, do watch it. If you're single and you want to be in a relationship, watch it, because at least you know what to look for. And if you're already in a relationship, maybe you can look at where you are in the 5 stages, and hopefully you are not going all the way through the 5 stages and get yourself into trouble. So on that note, my main message here is use this video, this live video, as a bit of a sit up and go, okay, where are we at the moment actually? Are we growing together? Are we learning together? Are we expanding together? Do we have a vision together, which includes all of that expansion and growth? Or are we kind of just getting on with our own shit and we're sort of fumbling along, and every now and again we have a bit of passion, we go out, blah, 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 and it's all right? Well, fucking hell, all right is not all right, okay? Just so you know, let's make it amazing. All right, I'm going to sign off. Hopefully that was useful. Go and enjoy the podcast in a couple of days. It's free, so go and enjoy it. It's 90 minutes of pretty intense, deep diving into relationships when it comes to growth, expansion, and growing together. I'm off for a bike ride. Take care, everybody. Have a lovely evening.